So let's get started. What is one invisible job a major label does behind the scenes that most independent artists underestimate? And how can they realistically cover it themselves or outsource it? Who wants to take that one? Loaded question.
I mean, okay, if nobody wants, I can step in. I think that actually touches a point that's something that we experience a lot, especially with the DIY movement and the new generations of artists and musicians coming up, is that we see that obviously a lot of the people and artists are focusing on the fun parts of being a musician, being creative, writing new songs, doing marketing, etc., etc. But there's always the shadow part, right? As a founder or entrepreneur, you know that. But when you're an artist, you create a business, right, of yourself. So you have to treat it as a business. And obviously this includes tax, legal, accounting, registration of your works, to really set yourself up properly, to have a strong foundation that you can build out your career. And obviously we see that independent labels, independent publishers take part in that, obviously, and help organize and structure that to make sure that artists don't need to worry about that. So I think this is what we see is still a quite important role that those players play. Obviously, we have admins now moving into the field a little bit stronger, and distributors. But yeah, I think this to open up the discussion, this will be my point number one.
I think it's such a good point that you make, Philipp, because a lot of times artists think once they sign a deal, they can just basically lay down and just do music. And I think especially then, you need to make sure that you get prioritized. So first of all, if you sign a deal, then that doesn't mean that you get the right attention that is required, especially if you don't have like a 6-figure advance that the label is trying to get back. So in the beginning, it's really important that that even if you get signed, you should straight, right? So, and that means that you probably already need to learn that before you sign. So, I think it's really tough because a lot of artists really want to focus on their artistry, and it's a huge struggle. You need a lot of patience for that. You also need to take your own risk in terms of monetization, go into it all with your own money. So I have a lot of respect for that. So if you don't feel comfortable of also owning that part of your business, for example, when I was studying musicology, and then later on American studies, I also had the possibility to take business classes, and I always didn't take them because I was like, I'm not interested in it. And only later on, when I got really into the industry side of things, I was intrinsically motivated. So I think you need to find that intrinsic motivation, ideally for yourself, and understand why you need it, or you need to find somebody who can help you set your business up.
I think it's also when you look at really like strong artists who have a sustainable income, over years, when they're performing on the market. These are usually the ones that have their shit together, in the back office, because they really make sure that of everything that they do on the creative and artistic side, they make sure that they get every cent and every dollar out of it, and make sure that they set up the structure in order to make sure, that everything actually comes in. We see a lot. I mean, when we pay out advances, we look at this, we do a quick audit, and we always see big deltas there, It's just when you look at the unit consumption and the actual accounting data that's coming in, you can basically always see some like deltas, deficiencies that shouldn't be there, And but we also see artists that are successful over a long span of time. And when you go in there and make an audit, you don't see anything, because they already have those stakeholders within their team or in their band camp, in order to make sure of that. And we see that they don't have to be the most successful artists, but they're really, consistently making good money with what they do.
Okay, so question for the audience members here. Any artists here who already have a lawyer or tax accountant? Just a show of hands. You can raise them high so we can see them. All right.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go get one.
Okay.
That's 60.
So then maybe a question For Colin here, what's the bare minimum legal and financial setup every independent artist should have by the time they release their first track?
Yeah, it's a bit of a tricky question, but first of all, I would love to know how many of you are artists generally? Okay, so that means only a bare minimum have a legal advice or tax accountant, which is okay. I think in the beginning, it makes sense because you need to own your artistry first and then get your business straight. And I think the second that you feel like this is coming to a successful level, where, I mean, there's no rule of thumb or there's no blueprint, but I think generally once you get an income of a 4-digit income, I think it makes sense to at least get advisory from a tax accountant, because they always have like a good tip for you as well to understand, like, how should I set my business up, what makes the most sense. And a lot of times artists forget about it, especially when you get an advance, that you need to pay some of that back. So, you know, once that's the point in your career, definitely make sure you have that in place. That's a lot of times I've met a lot of artists who just didn't think about that. And yeah, like I said, I think a big mistake from artists is a lot of times they strive for that deal. They really want to get that deal. And then they don't think about that still when you have that deal, like I said in the beginning, you need to make sure that, you know, you still own your business and your craft. But at that point, if you do sign a deal, for example, a lot of EDM artists make edits of 90s or Y2K songs, and then they pop and they get viral, and then they get offered a deal, and they should, in my opinion, a lot of times they should take it because they need to monetize it. You need to get the rights from the owners, right? And you can't do that without the right people in place and to get a deal. So at that point, it makes a lot of sense. And then I think it's the latest point in time, we need to make sure you have a lawyer in place that helps you understand the deal terms. So if you don't understand it, don't sign it, right? Who also understands to not make it too complicated. It shouldn't take too long as well, because sometimes it's all about timing. You need to sign fast. And I think that's the point when you need a lawyer.
I would also maybe just add to this as an advice, because I can totally feel, you know, maybe the hurdle that you have to overcome, you know, to go out and search for a lawyer, find the right one. You don't know where to start, you know, and you feel alone in those kind of like endeavors. But you have to realize that every musician, right, left to right, the ones that are close to you, the ones that are on the opposite side of the room, they all have the same challenges, you know. So it's always a good start to work with your community first, where you feel comfortable talking about your challenges that you have. And you would be surprised how much good advice you can get, you know, because there's probably always going to be like 2-3 people who already like been through that, you know, and can give you advice and maybe give you a little bit of a sprint, you know, to move forward and, you know, lower the fear or excitement of, you know, going this way. So I would always recommend doing this first, and then, you know, make a decision with whom you want to work with.
All right, question for Camille. So there's a lot of talk about the importance of metadata these days, which is important for paying out artists.
Yes.
Can you walk us through the top 3 metadata mistakes that sabotage an artist's payout potential?
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you mentioned, metadata is super important because it not only allows you to get paid, but it also can help you get your music into recommendation algorithms and editorial playlists. So I would say the first thing, it sounds really simple, but just make sure that you've claimed the correct artist page across DSPs. A lot of times I don't think people realize that there's actually, you know, 20 different artists with the same name, and a lot of the music, maybe 75% of the music, gets mapped onto one profile. And once that music's been mapped to that profile, and let's say there's a week or 2 weeks of streams that have accumulated, there's no way for us to then transfer that to another profile. So especially when you have a release coming up, just make sure, double check that the music is going onto your profile so you can actually then get the money from those streams. So that's number one. I would say the second thing is just making sure that the metadata is completely accurate. So not only making sure that like the spelling of all the names is correct, but also making sure that you tag the correct genres. I think sometimes people think they should tag 20 different genres on the track because it increases their chance of getting put into a playlist, but really it just dilutes the message, and the pitch will basically get lost in the shuffle because no one will know where to place it. So try to go for specificity and be really accurate and focus on I would say like have certain targets, like for example, certain target playlists in mind, and then tag the music according to that. And it's really just gonna increase your chances of getting in front of the right person or getting into the right recommendation algorithm. And then I guess the last thing, it's not really a metadata mistake, but just kind of advice I would give is when you're coming up with your artist name, just keep the search function in mind. So try not to get too complicated with like different symbols and numbers, and don't go for a name that's way too common, because you have to think about the fact that when people go into the search function and they type in your name, you want to be one of the top 5, one of the top 10 search results that comes up. So just keeping the really, really small, seemingly insignificant details in mind, because they're actually really, really important.
Awesome. And what about playlist pitching? From your perspective, what actually works, or what would actually turn off an editor completely?
Yeah, this is kind of the question that I get all of the time. I think it's no secret that we receive thousands of pitches a week, and more, I mean, you know, not to bring up AI so early, but we've recently released a press release saying that 18% of music uploaded on a daily basis on Deezer is AI generated, and 75% of that content is created for fraudulent purposes. So basically just someone uploading music to make easy money. And we've actually created a tool to flag that and remove that from recommendation algorithms. But that still leaves a big portion of music that's AI generated that has perfect metadata, like I mentioned, that's getting into those algorithmic recommendations and getting into editorial playlists. So again, making sure that everything is perfectly tagged. I would say when you are pitching, making sure that you're pitching on the appropriate channels. So not finding an editor on Instagram and spamming their DMs. I think that's like one of the biggest turnoffs. I even know some editors that put like no pitches in DMs in their bio because they just received that many messages. So for example, at Deezer, we actually have a pitching tool integrated on Deezer for Creators, which is like our analytical platform available for all artists that distribute on Deezer. So using tools like that, making sure that you fill in everything correctly, you put in the right target genres. And then I think also just thinking beyond the actual pitch. I think at the end of the day, everyone that works in this industry, mostly, especially on the indie side, we're here because we're music lovers, especially the editors. Like, they're hired because they're obsessed with music. They're going to shows 20 times a week. They want to discover new music. So I think putting yourself out there, engaging your community outside of streaming, so on socials or booking gigs, and just being present like at events like this, it's really just a good way to build your reputation as an artist and get yourself in front of the right person to eventually get into the right playlist or get into the right algorithm.
So your suggestion above all is to just use the tools built into the platform instead of trying to reach out to editors directly?
Yes, and just be kind. You know, you'd kind of be surprised that sometimes people think the best way to pitch is to say like, my track is the best for these reasons, and if you don't playlist it, you're missing out. Like, this kind of messaging is gonna immediately turn anyone off. So just being respectful of people and let the music speak for itself, really. And like I said, if you just put yourself out there and you grow your reputation, you will capture someone's attention, and then they'll go and they'll look at the pitch, they'll glance through the tags, but really they're gonna listen to the music, and that's what you want.
Just because I'm so interested in that, because we have a lot of discussions with artists that we're financing who see some, like over the last months, see some challenges on the frontline business, especially coming into playlists. They see that playlists don't get updated lately. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit on this. And the second one would be, because it's so interesting for us, elaborate on this, and also like, if an editor or a curator looks at a pitch that he's receiving, so outside of the typical music business, what are like key performance like indicators that he's looking at that you might be should also prepare, you know, because you know they're looking at this, like going to social media or whatnot? Yeah. Yes.
I mean, I'll answer the second question first. I think really like all of the editors, I can speak for Deezer really, they have hundreds of playlists that they're curating, and they would basically categorize them into different buckets. So you have your new release playlist, you have your moods playlist, your genre playlist, and they pretty much go into the pitches every week with an idea of which tracks are gonna go into which playlist. So I think obviously you wanna create your music according to your artistry and your artistic identity, but I think when you're going into the pitch, maybe doing a little bit of that work of seeing, okay, this would fit on this type of playlist pool. So like this should be targeted more towards like a genre list playlist pool and kind of catering it like that. I mean, like I said, there's tags that you could put in on the Deezer pitch form. You can even type in a little explanation of the music. There's even a suggested playlist field that you can fill in. So I think just trying to be a little bit mindful of that and not just going in and saying, okay, this should go into every single playlist in the alternative pool, like really trying to narrow it down.
So you'd recommend actually calling out the playlist that you think would be a good fit for the music that you're submitting?
100%.
Okay, so a question for Philipp then. You earlier mentioned an artist as a business. So when it comes to liquidity or finance for independent artists, what does a financially healthy artist look like these days in 2025, and what can they do to get there in like 6 to 12 months?
Just the last one?
Like what could they do realistically to actually get there within the next 6 to 12 months?
So, I mean, first of all, we're totally agnostic, right? So everybody who's earning royalties from music rights can get independent financing from us with full rights retention for the rights holder, right? So this is something that we've created in order to answer the needs that we see in the market also, that people want to stay independent for a longer time. They are educated on the value of their works and their IP that they create, you know, but at the same time they see that due to streaming and other reasons, obviously the realization of this value, you know, takes much longer than it did in the past. So there's not really an issue so much of creating the value, but there's an issue of, you know, getting the money actually, you know, to be able to operate also this, right, and foster your career and, you know, and be able to budget projects, et cetera, et cetera. What's important for us, and we've paid out everything between 10,000 euros and 2.5 million, right? So everybody actually is interesting for us. We want to talk to everybody. But when we say, so what do we see often that breaks a deal? Is if they totally chaotic in the way that they have registered their work, you know, how they treat their work, handle it, the way that they provide their accounting data and reports and all that kind of stuff, right? So if I already see, you know, this is very chaotic, you know, they don't really care about this, they're not aware of this, then I don't really see this entrepreneurial like mindset. And this is something that we also put in the evaluation if we think that person is a reliable, you know, asset owner for us in order to, you know, give him financing. So because the numbers, we don't care about the numbers. It's just, you know, if you have not so good numbers, you get a lesser payout. If you have better numbers, you get a better payout, right? So we've created this algorithm that's able to forecast this anyhow, right? So you could also be a back catalog that is only declining. I can still give you money on this, right? So we'll come from a different place. I'm not allowed to say that, you know, because we're not giving out loans or credits, but it feels for the rights holder that way, right? So, and that's very important for us in making an investment decision, right? Rather, not so much what genre, you know, how crazy famous artist he worked with, if he's going like this through the roof. We really don't care, right? We have a totally different view on this. But if they're not, you know, it's like a bank when you go to a bank, right? If you go there and you apply for a credit and you give them bullshit numbers and everything is, you know, like different formats and documents and stuff missing, then the bank goes and says, I don't know, you know, it doesn't feel safe. And that's the same with us. So if anybody's interested, right, just reach out. We're always happy to talk.
All right. I guess this is kind of an open question to everybody here. If an artist came to you today with one viral reel, but no plan, what would you personally tell them to do first?
Stay consistent. Stay consistent. The one thing is that was a fluke, maybe. So build on it. Use it. Don't let too much time pass. I think consistency is something in this industry that people don't mention enough. Like an overnight success is complete bullshit. Let's just, like, it's a 10-year, basically, process. I mean, people think that this industry is with, like, streaming and, like, AI now taking everything over. It's so much more fast-paced. Yeah, it is. but it's also still very slow. People forget that like bands like Muse, and I know this we're talking about electronic music mostly here. Muse it took them 10 years to get a record deal, and then they got the record deal, and that same record went triple platinum. So like, stay consistent, don't give up, and just make sure that you build on your moment, because that moment is gonna pass fast, but if you capitalize on it, you use the same structure with TikTok especially. I think reoccurring formats are working. That's at least what I can see on like a personal note. Use the momentum and stay consistent. Like, don't get discouraged because like, wow, I had a TikTok that had like 10 million views and my next one has 4. It's a total volatile business. I want to remind everybody that there is multiple artists that are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that never had a #1 record or a single.
Yeah, good point. Consistency compounds over time.
I would add to that also, and I would say try to focus on UGC, because really when labels are looking for new artists, they're not going to necessarily look at how many views your reel has, but they're going to look at how many people have used that sound. So if it's your original sound that made the reel go viral, like encourage people in your community to use that sound to make content, make remixes. I mean, we just published an interview with this artist called Molly, who has a mega viral track called Shake It to the Max. And she basically, I think she did the recipe to a T. She had a track go viral, a dance go viral. She created a dance. She had thousands, if not millions of people making this dance. She encouraged people to add their own verse. She released 3 different remixes. Like, it sounds like overkill, but it's really not. And it's been months since this track came out and she's still releasing remixes and they're still working. So I would say just like encourage your community to get on it, to use your sound, and like that's what's gonna get you noticed.
So user-generated content.
I would always say, people sometimes, or artists then see this as an achievement. I would always love artists to see this as an opportunity, you know, with a very short time window. You need to be focused, you know, and you need to make sure to seize this opportunity. And I think it's always important to prepare yourself for this situation, right? It's much better to think about today, you know what, with all the work that I'm doing, there might be the chance that I'm, you know, getting viral with one of the things that I'm doing. But think about, you know, if that's happening, what are the things that you do afterwards? You know, be a little bit prepared. You don't need to work this out in detail, but look maybe what other artists did, you know, see what fits to yourself, where you feel comfortable to prepare this. So if it happens, you have the ability to not think about first, what are you going to do, you know, talk. I mean, it's such a short window of time that you have in order to seize this opportunity. So it's good to be prepared.
Also an open question to all the panelists here. For someone with 0 connections, what's your best advice for building real relationships with DSP editors, curators, or other gatekeepers?
I can start. I would say the very first thing I would recommend before you kind of go out and do your networking is just making sure that your online presence is really reflecting what you want to show. Because I can pretty much guarantee that if you meet someone who works in the industry, or you meet an editor out at like an event like this, and you say you're an artist, they're gonna check your profile on DSPs and they're gonna check your socials. So you pretty much wanna make sure that you've pinned your accomplishments, that all of your pages are up to date, you have a photo on your DSP profiles, like little things, you have a bio. You just wanna make sure that if someone were to Google you right now, everything that's coming up is curated by you and it's expressing your artistic identity. So I would say that being the first thing, and then kind of circling back to what I was saying earlier about sort of letting the music speak for itself. I think you want to be really present, you want to be meeting people, and of course you want to advocate for yourself, but I think you also want to just connect with people on a human level, connect about, you know, your music taste, what you like, going to gigs, you know, being at an event like this, like going to panels, and not just being so much about like selling yourself, because ultimately, like I said before, the music should speak for itself. So if you build those human relationships first, then, you know, you build your reputation and people are gonna listen to your music a little bit more closely.
All right. Maybe this is a good one for Philipp. How should artists think about streaming versus direct-to-fan monetization? Is there a sweet spot between the two?
I think yeah, I think it's a combination, right? You have to find a good mix. We see DSPs or streaming platforms basically as the radio, you know, of this new era, right? So it's the same as radio. You go there, it's a marketing platform for you to show your songs, you know, and get awareness on the work that you're doing. And on the other side, for everybody who's listening, is there to discover music, right? And when we look at the radio, it's basically the same for us, right? So. Obviously, we have an issue right now because this became the center of monetization of music rights, right? And we're missing a sound device like we had with an album or maybe downloads. I don't really want to count them in, yeah. But there's a need for that, right? If you look at album tracks, you see how the business has been, you know, it totally changed from the album to track business. And that's why, because album tracks don't monetize anymore, right? So if you talk to the artists, they do an album, 3 singles, they are fine, but the rest, it's just basically sunk money, right? So because you cannot really monetize them the way that you did in the past, and I would say you should make sure to find a way to identify your fans, right? You need to understand their name, you need to find out how to reach them, you know? And you have to be creative about that, because if you create this community, then you have a possibility, obviously, to talk with them, right? To maybe collaborate, co-create with them, and integrate them in your world or career as an artist, and have them participate. How much and how inclusive you want to do this, up to you, obviously. But when you look at China, for example, how artists treating their fan communities there, this is crazy, right? I mean, they're chatting with them every day. They take hours and hours. But they make the really good money, because then they use direct artist-to-fan platform softwares. There's white label apps you can use in order to build those communities also for yourself, right? Being able to talk to them directly, but also monetize them eventually, right? With merch, with tracks, vinyls, whatever the things are that you want to do. So I would encourage everyone to look at solutions that are there under direct artist-to-fan solutions, apps, monetizations. You can Google it. You will find tons of stuffs and startups that are out there, and also look a little bit how artists are doing this in Asia and in China, because this was really mind blowing for us. How they totally different approach this. It's so far away from being on a stage, you know, and sing and then drive home, or going on Instagram and just do some posts but don't really interact, right? It's a total game changer over there, and we believe, if you want to be sustainably, long-term successful, you can only do this with a really close community. It don't have to be 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 people. You can do the math, right? I mean, if you get 1,000 people, 2,000 people, they give you $10 a month, right? This is a lot of money for a lot of artists, right? And that's not it's not 10 kilometers away, right? I think there's much potential that's laying on the floor that a lot of artists are not, taking the advantage of, because they're, yeah.
I couldn't agree more, and just wanted to get a clear example. For example, for Calvin Cole, you may know him. He's a now LA-based artist from Germany, who's doing singing, rapping, and his main goal was always to capture the US market, and I think he's on a really good path there. And what he did, for example, he gave his community even a name. So he calls it Triple Black Heart Gang. TBHG is the army. He always references them in his songs as well. And yeah, he also has a WhatsApp group with them, and he's online every day. I'm in that group too. And every day he's chatting with his community. And I think that's exactly what you're touching upon, right? It's finding that right channel of creating that emotional bond between you and your fans. And then get a good combination between streaming income and then monetizing on those people who are really into you. And maybe in the beginning it's only 2 people that come to your concert, or come to your live stream or in your WhatsApp group. But if you really engage with them, they're going to bring 2 more, right?
Any particular platforms you might recommend for somebody who might just be getting started? Besides,
from the top of my head, actually no. But if you come to me after the speech, give me 2 minutes and I'll find 2-3 names for you.
think it doesn't even matter what platform, as long as you're comfortable on it. And the thing is, I think to add to the whole sort of like community management, as they call it these days, I think the important part is to also listen to that community once you've found it. Because bottom line is your fans are 100 times smarter than yourself. Listen to them, what they are looking for, what they want. It's like if you write songs that somehow resonated with them, chances are that they're gonna give you input on like what works for them. And so I think you can even take this a little further in terms of how you engage with your fan base or your community. You can actually get input of like, okay, like what are you looking for in a song? What are you looking like, what, you know, is there a genre that I should try out? Like actually experiment, engage with them. And I think to add another example who does brilliant work when it comes to his fan base, and full disclosure, I'm also a fan of his, is Youngblood. Youngblood took it to a level where it's like, you know what, fuck all these festivals that charge $800 for a day ticket. I'm gonna do my own festival. It's gonna cost £45 and everybody can afford it. And if you can't afford it, reach the fuck out and I'll get you in somehow. And so I think community is everything, otherwise all of us wouldn't be here right now. It's all community based. So take them serious, and they're smart, very smart actually.
Amazing.
And very thankful, actually. If you open the door, you know, you would be so surprised how much love and good ideas and feedback you get, and that's so valuable for you. In the early beginnings of our startup, we did some Web3-driven projects, and that was a cool mechanic that we did, because you see, when you're on Spotify or anything, right, you only get the zip code of the people. You don't really see who are the people that are actually listening to my music, right? So if an artist would come and would do a new release, right? Let's say like next Friday, something, yeah. He will come through his social media accounts. You know, he would reach out, build a little landing page, have login, make a playlist save or pre-save. I don't know how they're called on Spotify and Apple. Always different names, you know. And then invite them to a pre-listening, right? And then on Thursday evening, right? He does a pre-listening. We had one artist who did this with a new album, actually. And then he had like 15 tracks, 16 tracks on there, and had said, I'm only going to put on 11 or 12, so you can vote, right? Let's have a discussion together. And then all of a sudden, the fan community actually could vote out of 16 songs, which 11 songs actually get on the album, right? So, and I mean, I could show you the papyrus roll of hearts and, you know, and great feedback around this. And the artist was so happy because then he realized we had like, I think, 87 people there, you know, fans. And he knew immediately those 87 people are the people that I now, you know, engage really with. This is the close circle for me right now. They've you know, took the step in, and it was really successful for him, right? Because this was a foundation for him then to start. Okay, I understand. I can identify them now. I can invite them. He did a WhatsApp group. You know, started to do this very simple. We did Discord. Nobody cared about this back then, But this is an advice that I can just, you know, give. Think about mechanics on how you can, you know, pull them from the big platforms, you know, and pull them over to your entity so that you have full control and full access. Because otherwise you will always be independent and you won't be able to really monetize to a full extent.
All right, yeah, the importance of community building. All right, one last question before we turn it over to the audience. What's one thing each of you wishes every independent artist would stop doing in 2025, and what should they do instead?
I can start.
Go for it.
I think I'm kind of just like repeating the same message, but the one thing would be to just not overlook the boring, mundane details. So don't just kind of like rush through the pitch or the tagging of your content. Like really be thoughtful about that and pay attention to the small details, because those things could be the difference between you getting paid or not, or you getting playlisted or not. So yeah, don't ignore the small details.
All right.
I would say stop trying to go viral and focus more on creating value.
Damn, I wanted to say that.
Yeah, sorry. So everything we just said about community, like think about what you want to express, what's your alter ego like? How do you envision yourself being in 5 to 10 years as an artist? I think, and then obviously you can express that also in short video content and focus on UGC, right? But don't focus on going viral.
Okay, anybody else?
Don't overthink it. I think we're all getting hung up in like, I mean, and this is kind of funny, you know, for industry people sitting here, how to be an artist. None of us have had, obviously, the success as an artist, potentially. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here right now. Don't overthink it. Focus on the songs. And I love Camille's point, like, don't overlook the mundane things. Obviously, being from a rights organization, I'm gonna have to say a little bit something in our favor, like make sure that you register your songs. Make sure that you can actually get paid for your songs once they're out, because, you know, like it's there. You asked this question, like, what are things that independent artists can do when they're not with a major label, obviously, like, and there is a shit ton of things that you can actually do yourself. Stop worrying so much about viral moments. Actually take out an hour a week to make sure that you have your admin straightened out. Make sure that your metadata is correct. Make sure that you register your songs. Make sure that you use certain platforms that can help just compromise all the information that you need. And success will come eventually. Like if you just stay consistent and make sure that you have all those boxes checked. There is plenty of artists that never, ever worked with a major label or anything like that that are hugely successful, and just because they're not here on the panel, never got any editorial support from Spotify or anything, and have 1 million monthly listeners and whatnot. So just stay focused. Stay focused, don't overthink it. It is just music at the end of the day.
All right. Thank you all. All right, we're going to turn it over to the audience. Any questions out there? Yes. Yes.
Hello, we are from Italy. We are producer and publisher. I would like to ask to the member of the GEMA this question. Nowadays, how much is important to have the sub-publisher in order to get the rights from other countries? In example, we registered the song in CIA in Italy. If the song is played in Germany, we have any chance to get the money, or the money
Of course.
not lose?
It's the short answer. That's a very, very good question. It's also, unfortunately, a very complicated situation, as you can imagine. And we've been with GEMA for the time I have been with them. Nothing is not complicated. It kind of depends. If your song, let's go down this rabbit hole for a second. If your song gets played on German radio, for example, you will absolutely get the money, because we usually license these radio stations on a track base. So we're going to get the information like with your metadata, full circle, and then we know, oh, you are members of CIA, and we transfer those funds to CIA, and then they pay you.
How you can know if the song is registered to CIA if we don't register to GEMA?
So we share a database globally with over 150 CMOs, and the only issue with that is it's not an active database, meaning that if you register a song with CIA, they put that song into that database, but if we don't have usage in Germany, we don't import that song into our database automatically. But as soon as we have like the smallest hint of a notion that like, oh, this is a song that is represented by CIA, we're gonna take the information from that, put it into our local system, and then we're able to pay you. The sub-publisher role usually comes in handy if there is incomplete metadata, and they can just make this process a little faster by registering the song with us directly before even any usage comes along. I think for the most part in the European Union, it's not completely necessary to work with sub-publishers as long as you know how the system works, which obviously is a bit of a black hole here and there. But I think if the catalog is not too vast, you can also always think about your core markets, you know, like think about like, okay, where's our repertoire used mostly, and then get in contact with the local PRO and say like, hey, we are CIA members in Italy. We know that our song was played. Could you please make sure that this is claimed correctly? Here are the, you know, share pictures or whatever. There is always a way, and especially CMOs are happy when people come to us and actually notify us like, hey, our song was played. I just want to make sure that this is getting collected, because the more data that we have that we might not have automatically, the better.
About streaming is the same, because
Streaming is much easier, because streaming mostly is handled through hub companies. Like GEMA, for example, uses ICE, which we work. I don't know how many PROs are using ICE. So basically, it's one big database, and they only handle the streaming royalties. So that's much easier. When it comes to streaming, you do not have to worry about anything.
All right, good question. Anybody else in the back over here?
Hi, thank you so much for everything that you guys have said. It's really valuable. So I feel like I might be quite naive in this question, but I've recently had a song playlisted, and I'm not quite sure what to do, because I'm hearing that take the opportunity, but be authentic in your process. So like, once that happens with a song, like what next as an artist, and how do I best utilize that happening to push my music forward? I don't know if you can answer that.
I mean, I guess it's kind of a hard question. It depends if you have another release coming up. I mean, I would kind of try to capitalize on the momentum. It depends what kind of playlist it was also. Like if it's a new release playlist, they usually have a shorter life cycle, so there's a chance it would be in there for a couple weeks, versus if it's in more of like a moods playlist or an evergreen playlist, there's a chance that your track stays in there for a long time. So I would just, I would maybe use that opportunity to mobilize your fans on other platforms to go and stream your track within that playlist. Because, when people are streaming your music within the playlist, for example, at Deezer, if you've been put into an editorial playlist, we've now launched a new artist-centric payment system, and every stream within an editorial playlist would count for double the payout, because we would consider it an active stream. So I would basically call to your fans and say, like, go listen to my song in this playlist, or like go and save this into your libraries, because then you're basically, you're just capitalizing off of that. You're getting more money per stream. And then, I would try to release again pretty quickly after, maybe a couple weeks, a month after, to just see if you can get into another playlist, maybe a bigger playlist, because usually the way it works is that there's sort of like a tiering system. So there's your entry-level playlists that are targeted more for discovery or new artists, and then you kind of would go into maybe like a moods playlist, and then you might go into like the top tier would be like a hits playlist, and those pretty much can stay in there for years. So try to identify the latter and try to see what would be your next goal, what would be the next playlist that you're targeting, and try to mobilize your community to stream your music and get yourself into that next level of playlist.
Thank you.
And not trying to contradict myself and saying don't focus on virality, right? But if you get a first sign that a song is picked up in a playlist, I think that's the point when you can think about have you made everything in your possibility to create content that may resonate with people on social media so that they create a sound, because you may have another opportunity to push that song on a different platform that then sends out signals to, again, the streaming service that you already playlisted on, or different other services. So you may build up on that momentum, just like Camille said. So I think it's a great first sign. So try to, make everything out of it, just like we said.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that is all. We have time for one more, or are we out? One more? Short one?
Any really important questions?
Which one should we, in the back over there?
Yeah, thanks for the last question. So I'm uploading my music through a distributor, and I'm also registering my music with GEMA. Is there any problems with that?
No. Thank you.
Yeah, because both are actually collecting the royalties, right?
Yeah, but separate royalties. So the distributor will get the royalties for recorded music, so your masters, and GEMA will collect your copyrights. Those are two separate things. It's not contradicting to do both. Actually, please do. Like, we don't have time to go into the details about this, but like, yes, that is totally fine. It's so fine with us even that we actually have our in-house distributor for new artists. So yeah, go use any distributor you want, but please also register with ACMO. Not even GEMA, just ACMO, like just a collecting society, you're good.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
All right, round of applause for our panelists. Thank you all for coming.